All right, all right, all right. Hey, Colin, what do the Ramones say?
Hey ho, let's go.
Well, hello, our legendary friends. We are very glad you joined us today for another episode of Legends and Losers. And Colin, we have a very special guest host today, don't we?
Yes, we do.
Do you want to tell our legendary friends who our guest host is?
Well, his name is Damp.
Yeah, he's got one of the greatest nicknames of all time. His nickname is Damp, and his full name, or would you say elongated name? Is that an appropriate? You just go with full name. Okay, would be Michael Danfous is how I would say it where I grew up.
Michel Danfous would be the way my meme would say it.
I like Danfous.
Michel Danfous, is that how she'd say it?
That's right.
Yeah, but in the Excited States of America, we can't say that. So what do they call you here?
Mike Damphouse, or formerly known as Damp.
Well, what do you mean formerly known as Damp? I thought you were currently known as Damp.
You got it.
Is it formerly or formally?
Oh, did I say formerly?
I'm not sure.
Formally with an A. Yeah, formally.
Yeah.
Oh, did you say fondly yours? Fondly yours?
Nobody would ever believe this is in the morning.
It's not the morning. What is it? It's about 8:30 at night right now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we'll get to the Damp story, but he's a great friend, and we couldn't be more excited to have you join us, Damp. Now, the first topic we wanted to touch on is an interesting story that was on Recode.net recently. The headline is, "The internet is slowly crushing pay TV." And apparently in Q1 of this year, 2017, quote, "Another 500,000 Americans cut the cord last quarter, a historically horrible Q1." And quote, "The industry shrank by 1.3 to 2.4%. That's a pretty big wide margin, but in a single quarter. And so what do you think's going on here, boys? The internet killed the TV star?
It's so much easier to stream nowadays, but I got to tell you, I get probably half of my content on my computer or my phone. And actually, I think part of the stats are missing. I watch some of it from Comcast on my phone. Do you think they get that stat?
I wouldn't think so, because this looks like it's people stopping subscriptions. So I would imagine that number's not in there, Dan. But that's just my guess. I'm not the analyst who did the work. Not so much on the analysm for me. Did I say that out loud?
You're terrible.
All right. Well, moving right along. Interestingly, I saw this article on Slate declaring that podcasting, quote, "podcasting has become the last refuge of scoundrels." And so I guess that makes the three of us and our guest today. We have another guest other than Damp, because Damp's the guest host, right? So we have a guest.
Correct.
So he's a legendary podcaster as well. So I guess that makes him part of the, quote, refuge of scoundrels. But the point is that people like Bill O'Reilly and Lance Armstrong, because they have podcasts, there's an assumption that's all they can do now. And so
because they've been outcast.
Yeah, I guess if you're an outcast, you have a podcast. Is this a podcast is the domain of the douchebag outcast? And it says so I read this, and I'll read this to you. This is about the O'Reilly talking on his podcast right after he got fired. This is, quote, "While O'Reilly's staff is indeed labeling it on the website as a podcast, O'Reilly himself can't even stoop to utter the word in reference to his new vessel, favoring TV terms like special broadcast or segment." So O'Reilly can't even say podcast. Now, on the flip side, or maybe these are connected, you guys tell me, Aaron Griffith just recently ran a list in Fortune and of venture capital firms that are podcasting. and she's got 20 VCs who are doing podcasts. So does that just validate that podcasting is for scoundrels, or?
What
I think people.
What percentage of VCs is it?
I'm just kidding. I don't know what I think that would be a very small percentage. Well, I don't know if that's all the VCs. It's just the
Right.
ones that made her list.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then another podcasting update. Joe Rogan recently announced that he gets 120 million downloads a month of his show. That's obviously over 1 billion downloads a year.
I think Chris, people are consuming media any way they can, in cars and bed, everywhere, and podcasts are right up there. It's, without a doubt.
Well, the amazing thing to me about that stat, Damp, is only about 20% of Americans consume a podcast every month. And so,
what's that rate growing?
That's a good question. I don't know. I have no idea.
It'd be good to know that.
I wonder if it's in the research. We could dig that out. We should go look. But it is interesting how powerful the medium is.
It's a long way to go.
And that Rogan can be at 120 million a month with only 20% of the American population.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. So, hey, Damp, speaking of crazy, let's talk about how we met.
It's funny, Chris, you may not even remember the day we met, but it was, I think it was like 1999-ish. I had started a software company called Pangea back in 95. And I was out in California, Silicon Valley, trying to take advantage of the .com boom and try to sell it to somebody who wouldn't look under the hood. And I was walking around the...
Are you saying you were a little bit of a shyster, Mr. Dumfries?
No, but let's just say that it was more of a great idea than it was, fully delivered. So I was walking around the cubicles at Vaniv, actually, and I had a quick intro hello to you, and before I walked into someone else's office. I think you had hair back then, just a little. Hard to remember.
Like the fuzz, just holding on to that last little bit of peach fuzz.
Yeah. And that's when I think we first bumped into each other, and then I think the next time was when I showed up at Tahoe one day and just knocked on the door. Oh no, Jive. At Jive, that was the next time.
Hey, do that with your hand again when you point at the camera. Yeah, you look like a mythical god. Yeah, with your beard and everything. Now bring your hands into the camera.
Closer to the camera.
Like yeah. That's really cool. Doesn't he look like some kind of a character out of Lord of the Rings or something? Yeah.
Especially with the water and the islands. Yeah, people should
really check this episode out on YouTube if you can, because Damp's got that. That's a really awesome Zoom background you found.
Yeah, no, this one stays because it comes with birds.
Yeah, this one's actually not a Zoom background. This is actually where you are, isn't it, Damp?
It is. I'm on a lake in New Hampshire and loving every second of it. If we hear chainsaws or wood chippers, we're not going to go back to that Fargo discussion. But let's just say my neighbor might be getting rid of somebody.
We should have Damp record some audio and then send it to Eric for inclusion in the backgrounds, add audio.
Who's Eric?
Eric's the founder of Zoom.
Oh, Eric. Yeah, that's a great idea. Anyway, back at the ranch. So you think next time we met was at Jive? I
think it was Jive. I think I can't remember if it was Tahoe or Jive, one of the two. But anyways, we obviously had common friends, for years, and we each knew each other's name. And then it's probably 10, 12 years ago or so, we bumped into each other, and I ended up at Tahoe one weekend with my wife, and we just sort of kept hanging out since.
That was it. Yeah. And I love that you're an entrepreneur and you're a marketing guy. You're a digital marketing guru, and you're an entrepreneur CEO.
And that's actually how I met your guest today, Chris Brogan. It was probably, I don't know, Well, actually, I'll give you my loser story here. So, and
Yeah.
everyone's got to have a loser story, even the guest host. It was about, I think it was 2005. I had a couple of CEO, CMO jobs and bouncing around, and I wake up one day and walk into the office, and they said, "No, you're fired today." And it's all right. Half life of an executive isn't all that much. And so I walk out. That was May 3rd, and on July 3rd, decided I was going to get a divorce. So it was all good. It was a good decision, and but that day, not
Who
wanting to leave
says,
my
and then I decided to get a divorce and it was all good? That's a
it,
strange
it
sentence right there, damn.
I say all good now. 12 years later, it's all good. Back then, it was pretty stressful, but I didn't want to leave my wife and kids changing their lifestyle, so I literally grabbed a bag of clothes, a bathroom kit, my guns, and a fishing pole, and I got into my truck and I drove away. And I basically lived out of my truck and slept on friends' couches for a while.
This sounds like the beginning of either a movie or a country and western song.
It was definitely a country western song, and it went on for probably, I don't know. My parents finally took me in, and you always move back to your parents if you have to.
How old were you when
Um,
you boomeranged back to your parents' house?
2005, I was 41.
Oh yeah,
41.
there you go.
Guns and all.
Moving back
Oh,
in.
everything. And my dad was so pissed off. He used to be the president of Lockheed, one of their divisions, and to see his son fail really hit him hard. But it was a good experience for me because I turned around. I ended up meeting my wife, Linda, and we have a wonderful relationship. We started Green Leads, which is the company I ran up until last year. And, it went from, me in my living room and Linda in the closet. She had her office in a closet, to now,
What do you
we
mean
built it
Linda
up
was in
to
the
a,
closet? What was she in the closet for?
she was in the closet. We had a big closet that we turned into an office.
That was
Uh,
where the desk was.
Sounds kind of
yeah.
weird, damn.
And so she came out of the closet about 2 years into the business. And so
That's
we
not
built it.
weird.
It's not. But if you met Linda, you'd totally laugh at it because she's the least likely to ever be in a closet. So we built the company up. We got it, I don't know, 100 people, and we're in 3 countries now. Doing all sorts of demand gen and building pipeline for companies, helping people. That's what we did at Jive with you, Chris. And it was during that whole
I
time I was
love that you
speaking at
feel a need to
conferences.
remind me what your company does for a living. just
All
checking.
right. Just, I want to make sure, Chris, you don't forget part of your life when you worked with me.
It's like
Um,
I heard an interview with Ozzy Osbourne not long ago, and he said he can't remember the 80s. Like there's 10 years there. I don't know.
Is that
so
all?
we,
There's got to be my. I don't know if you can remember the
I
70s.
actually think it's probably more than the 80s. He's
I,
probably being kind to himself.
I think
the most recent years, I'll bet are fading on him right now.
Actually, it's funny. You want a little diversion on that?
Yeah, shoot.
So at Sweet World, they hired this band to be the Sweet World band, the second year in a row. And the band's called Royal Machines. And the Royal Machines is an amalgamation of mostly 90s kind of era rock stars, started by I believe Dave Navarro, who's the guitar player from Jane's Addiction. The bass player from Jane's Addiction, if I'm not mistaken, is kind of the guy that coordinates it all. And essentially, they put together a band and they go jam around LA, and they're available to do corporate gigs. And you get, Steve Stevens, the guitar player from Billy Idol, and then you get the guitar player from The Cult, and then you get the drummer from Jane's Addiction and the bass player from Jane's Addiction. And then they have a couple of no-name singers who are awesome. And then they sort of have all these star singers they bring in. So for example, at NetSuite, we had Courtney Love and Mark McGrath and Perry Farrell.
wow.
Yeah. And so now why did I go down this rabbit hole?
Ozzy
We're talking
Osbourne.
about where you
Oh,
guys.
Ozzy. So we got to meet the band. Jeez Louise. We got to meet the band, which was really very cool, right? Because a lot of these guys playing a lot of my favorite bands anyways. And it turns out one of the singers that rolls in and out of Royal Machines on a periodic basis is Ozzy. And then Ozzy was actually at Sweet World last year. And unfortunately, I
Cool.
was a moron and I missed it. And so I was asking the guys in the band, and I won't name who I was asking, but, so can Ozzy hide his own Easter eggs, or how's he doing? and they said he's the consummate professional. He shows up on time. He does his thing. I think I don't know if I asked if he needs a confidence monitor. I think he probably needs the lyrics, but don't we all sometimes? But so anyway, apparently the Royal Machines say Ozzy's right on, and he's a pro, and he's your guy when you want him.
He's the man.
Well, you haven't forgotten any lyrics from Spinal Tap, have you?
I think I know most of them,
Can't forget those.
No, I mean, really, if you study the lyrics of Spinal Tap, there's a lot of school you don't really need to go to. But I digress. Damp,
Yo.
back to you. How did you be so Green Leads? You're a
So
marketing genius. You're appointment setting. You're filling pipeline, and you're an ass kicking what I like to call small E entrepreneur with offices in
having a
London. And where was your third location?
Jamaica mine.
Man, you pick
Yeah.
great locations, right?
Well, doing what we do, we can be anywhere because it's phone and email. And we acquired a company in London, and then we opened a call center in Jamaica. We've since moved the London office to Ireland, so now we're in Ireland for some Guinness and Jamaica for some Red Stripe. So
There
two
you
beer
go. We like
capitals
to
of the
pick
world.
our office locations by the quality of the beer.
That's right.
It's
So
a good strategy.
let me get back to Chris.
And yeah, how did you meet Brogan?
Yeah, so Brogan. So he's going to be an incredible guest, by the way. So I was speaking at, I think it was a HubSpot conference years ago, and I walk on stage and do my gig, and then I walk off, and they say, "Hey, we got a panel, and one of the guests just canceled. Would you go on?" And I said, "Yeah, who's on?" And they said, "So and so from HubSpot." I don't even remember who it was. It was Roberge or Dan Tyre. And Chris Brogan. And I'm like, Brogan? And I'm like, this is so cool because I'd been listening to Chris's podcasts, and I have to say he probably influenced how I did a lot of the marketing I did to build my company. And so I get on the stage and we were having a great panel, and some guy asks a question, and it got, the host of the panel, who I can't remember who that was, basically affirms that this guy has a brilliant answer, and it was moronic. Like it was something absolutely ridiculous about marketing. And I just told them, I said, "You guys, you're like totally off base." And I give him the answer and blah, blah, blah. Chris starts bantering in with me. He loved it because he loves, he loves emotion and conviction to an answer. So we get off stage, and I'm walking out, and I'm thinking, well, that was cool. I'm on with Chris Brogan. And he comes and finds me, and he says, "Hey, Mike," he goes, "that was so cool." He said, you were able to put the whole place on edge with some new things to think about. I love that. Take care, man. We'll have to talk some more. Well, come to find out, we're in another conference a year later, and he bumps in, we're having a coffee, and he says, "I think we live near each other. We live 3 towns apart." And we had never known that. So I got to know Chris, have coffee with him once in a while, chat with him a lot. And I went over last year after Play Bigger's book was released, and I figured Chris had to get his hands on it, so I brought him a copy. And at the time, you were just starting up your podcast, Chris, and I said to Chris Brogan, I said, my buddy's doing a podcast. I should tell him to go look up all your stuff, and if you're ever in the mood to be a guest somewhere, I'll let Christopher know. And so anyway, that's how we ended up today, getting him on your show.
Well, and the wild thing is, Brogan is one of the pioneers in podcasts and podcasting, and I mean, he's the man. I mean, he's a media company. I mean, he is a bona fide social media guru and celebrity. And the interesting thing is, a lot of these, celebrities of any kind, frankly, but some of these folks can get really full of themselves. And
Not
he's
Chris.
just, he's so fun. And hey, Dan, why are we wearing these Batman t-shirts?
Yes, so you probably can't even see it on the camera. Hold on. So I got mine on.
Oh, there you go.
My
Yeah.
Batman shirt.
You got your pants
And
on too, Damp? That's good.
I do. Thank God. And Christopher, you got yours on, and you got the plaque behind you.
Yeah, I got the plaque, and I got Abigail's with us today because she's a huge Brogan fan. So dinosaurs love Brogan.
Well, Brogan loves Batman. Let's put it that way. So we surprise him, don't we, Chris?
Yeah, we surprised Brogan with the Batman t-shirts. And so Damp and I had this great conversation with Chris Brogan. And Colin, you want to give us Chris's background, and we'll roll him on in here?
Of course. So Chris Brogan provides strategy and skills for the modern business. He's the CEO of Owner Media Group, a sought-after public speaker, and the New York Times best-selling author of 9 books, working on his 10th. He's also a pioneer in podcasting, and his show, The Owner's Mind, is a smash hit. Forbes calls Chris a must-follow marketing mind. He's been on the Dr. Phil show. He interviewed Richard Branson for a cover story for Success Magazine, and Tony Robbins interviewed Chris on his Internet Money Master series. And now, Chris Brogan is on Legends and Losers.
You and I share Batman. He was always my favorite.
Oh, that's great.
And in the Legends and Losers studio, my wife, Carrie, got me this sign, and it says, I'm not saying I'm Batman. I'm just saying no one's ever seen me and Batman in the same room together.
I think it makes perfect sense to me. I think it's clear. By the way, an interesting nonfiction book, and even better still, the audio book, is a book called The Cape Crusade. And it's a documentary of, a nonfiction work about all of the various types of portrayals of Batman throughout time. The audio is fascinating, though. The guy who did it, I think he had something to do with NPR as well or something. So he's got a kind of radio talent voice, and he does different voice effects and stuff like that. He alone just makes the narration of it really interesting. It's a great ride for a long duration in the car kind of book to be on.
How did you get into Batman, Chris?
Well, so actually there's a story there, because when my grandfather was a candy salesman in Augusta, Maine, and I used to go out on his route with him, and the candy stores, by the way, would be at places like the Greyhound Bus Depot at a place called Depot News, or Flo's Variety up on Sand Hill in Augusta, Maine. And all of those places had a comic book spinner as well as candy, because this is how we lured children in the 70s. And I would get a handful of comics at pretty much each stop, because back then it wasn't like an investment property and children could have a comic. And so I did a lot of my reading and learning of reading from that. And I liked Marvel comics just as much. Some people were either staunchly Marvel or DC. But I was always strongly into the idea of Batman, because all I thought is, if someone just murders my parents and I become a billionaire, I could be just like him.
He was very relatable in that way.
Right. I mean, I'm never going to be from Krypton. No dead space policeman is ever going to give me his ring. There's all these other origin stories that are less likely for me to be, but I could be Batman.
That's right. Well, and the thing I always loved about Batman, which is why he was my guy too, is, to your point, he's just a regular guy. He doesn't have any superpower per se, right? He creates himself to have superpowers. It's self-generated.
Right. What's interesting about him when you think of category creation is he in no way created that category. There were very many other superheroes that he was copped from. He was stolen from lots of the genre around him, the Green Hornet and all these kinds of people, etc. But the one thing that he did do slightly differently was they developed the city around him, and they developed the rogues gallery around him, and that became so much more tangible than a lot of the other superheroes at the time. And I think in that way, that's how he became his own category, strangely, by developing everything but him around him.
People could relate.
And so do you think if you take Gotham out, he doesn't exist, or he doesn't exist in the way he does today?
He'd be a lot harder to figure out in Sheboygan. You know, I mean, I just get this feeling that, you know, he wouldn't make a great polka dance player or something.
And do you love the old show from the 60s?
I tolerated the old show from the 60s. You know, now that I'm an older man, now I appreciate it. But as a child, I was like, that's not Batman. That's some weird happy man who dances and sprays down sharks. You know, I wanted tough Batman. And when we were kids, that just wasn't the way it was. So I don't know.
You know, it's funny because, of course, all those old shows now are available on iTunes or Netflix or, you know, all that stuff. And I hadn't watched them for, I mean, I don't know how long. And about, I don't know, 6 or 8 months ago, I don't know what tweaked me to, if I saw or read something or whatever, and I downloaded a bunch of them. And I love to watch them when I'm traveling and just sort of falling asleep at night. You know, kind of you watch sort of the first half of the episode and fall off to sleep, and your Kindle sort of dies and goes night-night for you. So it's the old Batman is now my nighttime travel kind of entertainment.
I love that. You know, one of the things that I read in that same book, The Caped Crusade, was that we can't have one Batman without all the other Batmen. And there's this thing that's like, you can't be a big fan of Christopher Nolan's and not at least acknowledge the Adam West Batman, etc. And so it was interesting because what they said was there's sort of a spectrum of Batman, and you can like the one that you want to like. I mean, someone out there likes the George Clooney Batman.
I don't know who that is.
Didn't George Clooney have the nipples? Didn't we have that? Was he the only Batman, Chris, to have nipples?
I'm afraid so. He was the only movie Batman that had the nipples going, and it wasn't his choice, and it wasn't anyone that's willing to admit its choice that suddenly there were nipples on the suit.
So even Batman had a loser part of his life.
And so nobody admits to being the designer of the nipples.
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, that would be a really kind of fun thing to go Googling. I created Batman's nipples. Sounds like a good band name, too.
I created Batman's nipples.
Probably an emo band.
And the other thing I love about Batman is the stuff, right? All the toys, the swag. I don't know. And the imagery, like I like the dark side of Batman, right? And so there's all sorts of cool imagery with the toys and all that stuff. And yeah.
You know, if you haven't availed yourself of it, the Lego Batman movie is probably my favorite portrayal.
Really?
It pays such a great homage to all of the types of Batman, and the toys filter into that. And it's just so well done. And Will Arnett, who plays Batman, just takes on a whole different version of him that's just so fun. And not only is it very accessible, but it just takes it this very interesting place, which is that Batman is the person and Bruce Wayne is the costume.
Cool.
Oh, wow. So we got to get the Lego Batman.
Afraid so.
On my list.
Excellent. Well, where do you want to go from here, Mr. Brogan?
You know, I'm a loser every day of my life. So, I mean, there's a lot of ripe territory to mine from. So it's really up to you. Whatever works best, I'm in any which way.
Well, so we love this word. I'm not even sure if it's a real word. We call it losery, you know, like when there's losing shit going on in your life, it's losery. Yes. And so, you know, obviously you're a legend. There's no question. But I'm curious to know what are the key moments of losing and a losery in your life that you think really led you to be the Chris Brogan that we know today?
There are so many. And it's funny because I can think one of the things that makes me very different than a lot of my contemporaries is that I'm in love with failure. I have a whole bunch of chapters on it, in maybe even 2 in my last book, The Freak Shall Inherit the Earth. I said, you know, failure.
Which, by the way, might be the greatest. I don't know. Do you consider it a business book?
That's what they thought, but
yeah. Well, so that might be the greatest business book title of all time.
Thank you. It was the least selling, so there was a losery thing. I can tell you that the idea of failure has always been with me. I was my Aunt Jane, who happens to also be a school teacher now, and who also stables horses and things like this. She was asking the question, "Can you name all your K through 6 teachers?" And I couldn't. I could name 3rd and 4th grade and also 6th grade, and then a lot of later teachers. But my 3rd grade teacher, the reason I remember her name is Debbie King, was that she got this brand new cork board and she was so proud of it. And when we did good work, we could go and put it up on the board. Well, so she said to me, I had done a haiku of all things. Good job, Chris. Go stick that up on the board. Okay, says I, stick that up on the board. I go around the corner and I put my haiku up on the board and I go back to my seat. She'd not had a cork board for like 2 years. She saved up some of her own money to buy this thing. She turns the corner to go see something about a half an hour later and notices my work and screams, Chris! And I'm like, what? And she said, you glued it to the cork board. And I said, yeah, you said stick it on the board. Stick means glue. You didn't say pin. And so from then on, I think I've always just had this idea where sometimes my version of reality doesn't quite match the status quo. And there's days when it doesn't work out so well for me like that. That would be one of those. Smashing my 1976 Huffy Thunder Road into the side of the house and cracking the front fender on the second day of owning it was one of those days. And as I'm crying and as my mom's trying to make sure I'm okay and all that, I told her she has to move the house because the house was in the way. I wasn't at fault for driving my bike into the house. The house was in the wrong spot, obviously. So when I think of losery things that I've done, it's always that, right? It's always some entrepreneurship moment where I am clearly certain that the market is going to do this thing, and they have no idea that that is what I wanted several million people to do. I don't know why.
Even Chris Brogan can't get several million people to do what you want them to do all the time.
Sometimes I can't get 2 people to do what I want, and they have my last name. But, you know, I'm telling you, there's no end of these.
We know
moments.
how you feel about that.
There's no end to these moments where, you know, you're pretty sure, like you've read all the tea leaves, you've thrown the bones a few times, you've got it all figured out. There's crows circling, and yet the omens lead you down the wrong hole. And I've just done it a lot of times. I've invested my own money when it wasn't like I had a lot of money. I just took the money I had earned and put it into something. Bad thing. You know, I hired a lot of people the first time I got money, which then I read the book, How to Get Rich by Felix Dennis. And the biggest, most important lesson was that overhead walks on 2 feet. Don't hire a ton of people if you don't need them. And so I had to let a bunch of really well-working, nice-meaning people, I had to let them all go because I didn't have enough revenue for them. And you know, so I'm studded with those kinds of losery experiences.
And what led you to want to be an entrepreneur?
I don't know that I wanted to. I don't think I'd wish this on anybody.
Why do you say that, Chris?
Oh, you know, entrepreneurship is silly. Like the whole concept is you assume a greater portion of risk and, you know, hopefully for the greater amount of reward. But that part about assuming greater risk comes way before the greater reward. So a lot more times than not, you fall in a hole. And, you know, there's a lot more people who are like, I am so thrilled that I work at Denny's. Then there are people who say, boy, I'm so glad that, you know, I decided to drive, you know, get into this crazy bouncing roller coaster. I think that entrepreneurship does not suit a great portion of humanity. And I think that it's we, the diseased, who get to lead the way and then have smarter people come behind us and shore up our stupid ideas into something that actually really works. And I think that's how the universe gets created.
It's interesting. Like I'm a person who feels like I grew up on the island of misfit toys, and when I talk to entrepreneurs, it seems like a lot of entrepreneurs feel the same way, that they didn't quite feel like they fit in the world, and so because they couldn't necessarily find a place that was a good fit, they had to, if you will, make a place. Was that the case for you?
100%. I mean, my origin story on the back of my superhero comic book would be that Chris Brogan was born in Augusta, Maine, which was too city to be a country boy and too country to be a city boy. And I grew up with the same 3 conversations around me, which were Van Halen versus Led Zeppelin, Van Halen, Mustang versus Camaro, would the Red Sox ever win a World Series? No. And then I was wrong several decades later, but I was right for many decades. And that was it. And then weather, right? And that was all 4 conversations. And I was into superheroes and Star Wars and Star Trek and all this nerd baloney. And none of my neighbors were. And along came bulletin board services, which were the nerdiest thing. You could dial in with an old modem to somebody else's stupid ass other computer, and you could vote on things or write in forums. And it was like Twitter.
What year was that, Chris, when you started to play with the forums on the emerging interweb?
Oh, the early 80s before AOL. And then I was an AOL and CompuServe and Prodigy kid. You know, I did like 7,000 free demos of AOL because there's no way my parents were going to pay.
So 300 baud modems.
Oh, I had a 300 baud modem. I remember when I got the 12, I thought I was screaming. I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to be able to download an entire sentence in a second.
I actually had the acoustic coupler with the rubber seals.
Oh yeah.
It was cool as shit.
But you had to get that shit on exactly right? If it was a little bit off.
You're screwed.
You were literally spilling bits by something physical that you could alter in the real world, which is still amazing to me.
Yeah. I never thought about it that way, Chris, but you're right, because like if the top part of the receiver was, you're spilling bits into the air.
Absolutely. And the real old fashioned version of the word literally, like that was how it was going. So I was in that world. And then what happened was I could suddenly on bulletin board services talk about things like Star Trek fan fiction, which you couldn't be. I mean, it's like free celibacy to talk about that kind of a thing in the open world. But online, I could use a nom de guerre, and no one would know it was me. So I could maybe still have the possibility of having sex, because I could talk to strange people about Star Trek and not be doing it in my school.
Yeah, as young men, we learned quickly that talking to young ladies that we would like to get to know about how awesome C-3PO is probably not going to work out.
As it happens, no. Or, which D&D character would you be?
That's maybe even worse than talking about Star Wars.
No question. I mean, at least Star Wars was popular enough that there were toys, and at least we could at least fake, some kind of common ground. So that's how I started things. So when you talk about, creating my own world, I started way back then. And then along the last bunch of years, I started blogging way back in 1998 when they were calling it journaling. I was using WYSIWYG software to make a blog. I podcasted in 2005, so a year after the real birth of podcasting. So bleeding, but not leading edge.
How did you, I'm curious, how did you know about podcasting? Like, what was in your head when you said, I'm going to go do that?
I was reading like all the tech blogs. So I was working at a wireless telecom when that was all going on. I was reading all the tech blogs. And so I started getting links to these things like, various podcasts like the O'Reilly podcast and all that. And so I was having the craziest situations happen. This is a real life example. I was working in a wireless telecom. We were using Sun Microsystems hardware. And I listened to an interview with Jonathan, why am I blanking on his name, formerly the CEO of Sun for a very long time.
It wasn't Schwartz.
Schwartz.
Was it Schwartz? Jonathan Schwartz. There you go.
And so I was in a meeting with like 16 or 20 other people, including 5 Sun representatives and a bunch of others. And they were selling us this equipment. And I was there just as one of the technical consults. And across the table comes this document, this big fat, like purchase and order, bill of lading kind of a document sort of. And I look it over and I said, wait a minute. Are these the Sun whatever part number? And they say, yeah. I said, why would you sell us these if Jonathan Schwartz says that the other ones are coming out in like 14 days? And the entire room shuts up and looks at me. And the Sun guys look at me like, when were you talking with the CEO of Sun Microsystems? To which I realized I made it sound like Jonathan called me like, hey, Chris.
Just so you know.
Parts. And I said, O'Reilly interviewed him or someone interviewed him. And it was such and such and this. And they were like, we're going to have to cut this meeting short. And they all left. And it was like a multi-million-dollar brakes, feet on the brakes moment. And I was like, boom, there's something to these podcasts. So that's kind of why I got into it. And a lot of the things I stumbled into as far as new media making, it was all for my own weird purposes. I was always kind of like the weird scientist in the lab, and blogging was just a way that I could talk about things I wanted to talk about because I couldn't get mainstream publications to talk about it. Podcasting, I could listen to what I wanted to hear instead of terrestrial radio. Video blogging years later, same thing. I could watch what I was into and not have to flip 500 channels and find nothing.
Yeah. Chris, you focused the past couple months real heavy on video blogging.
Yes.
Tell us a little about that, because I think the shift is really interesting. A couple years ago, people weren't going that direction.
Yeah, well, so it is part of an entire project of, oh gosh, maybe everything I believe is solid and true is not true. Now, by the way, the curse of knowledge, as they say, and or monkey mind in Buddhism, there are things I believe firmly, which is that email marketing is alive and well and will never die. There is a lot of new material out there saying that email marketing is going to die. There are a lot of reasons why that I've not believed until now. However,
hold on. So I hate to interrupt you, but you are now beginning to believe that email marketing is going to die?
I am willing to accept that it's a possibility, which I was not believing before. I mean, think about this. We could have this argument in 2002, and I could say faxes are going away, and you'd be like, pshaw. So, you know, everything dies eventually. However, email has had the longest, and Mike and I have been at a lot of the same conferences where I've brought Mike to conferences to say, can you please slap these people that think Twitter is the future? And Mike will, and his gruff Mike Damphouse voice, he'll be like, you're all a bunch of fools. And he'll show stats, and the stats will say, you are fools. But there's new stuff out there. And for one, U.S. Department of Labor says that the average American reads 19 minutes a day, period, across all things, 19 minutes a day reading. So
Holy fuck.
That's not us.
How can that be true?
Because
they only read the headlines.
Yeah, they read the titles of things and they don't actually read beyond them. They read text messages. They read in brief little snips and tweets.
This is like the worst thing I've heard in a while.
I don't want to get political, but there's a certain U.S. president that gets the majority of his news from Fox. So that said,
Easy there, handsome.
You can edit that if you have to. The stat that also couples with this is that YouTube has reported that people consume 1 billion hours of video a day. 1 billion hours just on YouTube, not the whole rest of the internet, which there's plenty of stuff not on YouTube, right? And so Netflix, Amazon Prime, all of those things, Hulu.
Vimeo, all that other stuff, right? Yeah.
All of them. 1 billion just on YouTube. My children go to YouTube to ask questions. They never Google things. They YouTube things, right? So when I'm starting to look at this, when I'm starting to see chatbots, AI, all kinds of machine design, I'm seeing something. And the reason I got into video blogging is I'm seeing something. We need to become video literate. We need, as far as how we compose and express ourselves in video, the same way we had to be really good at writing blogs and emails. When people weren't queuing into email 32 years ago, we were saying to them, look, dumbass, you got to stop thinking it's just about the phone. You've got to learn how to write better emails. You're an idiot in email, and no one's going to believe that you're a grown-up. Well, Merry Christmas 2017 and beyond, probably 2013, and we're only just getting to it now. We have to be better at making video or we're doomed.
And Chris, do you distinguish between a video blog and a video podcast?
So that one's tomato, but video blogging in general, let's just say the video blog, the concept, at least as far as it's been sort of colloquialized, there's our word for the day, is that a video blog is more slice of life. Video podcast can be topical. And also then you can go a little further and say that we need to there's like 20,000 different ways to make video ads, video marketing, video copy, video how-to, behind the scenes. And all of these are very different ways we shoot, just the same way a documentary is shot very different than action comedy. So
I find myself way more compelled when I'm just scrolling through Facebook, see what my kids are up to. When I see video, I'm much more compelled to look at it than go read an article.
And Facebook makes you do that too. Facebook pushes that button on you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it really feels like there's been a big shift with Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter to prioritize video.
No question about it. And Twitter is lagging in those whole bunch, but that's what they're thinking is going to keep them alive a little longer is, we're going to make the video experience better. Sorry, guys. We'll catch up. I don't feel as in love with live video as everyone seems to be, except that I think that the tools to use to make live video, which then allows you to play it again later, I think is perfect. I think live is dangerous because we invented DVRs for a reason. And I think that that's not going away. I think time shifting is still something really true in our world. But video changes a lot of things. People say some things about me. They go, I didn't know you had any kind of sense of humor. And I'm like, I think I'm the funniest guy. And they're like, well, it doesn't sound that way in email. I'm like, damn it. I don't know how to write then.
You don't know how to write funny. I don't know how to write funny either.
Writing is one thing, but verbal expression in people's faces, that's how we communicate.
Well, and I never thought in the beginning, like I remember when I first saw the Howard Stern show on TV, and I sort of thought, who the fuck's gonna watch like a bunch of people talking?
Right.
And he had like strippers and shit.
Right.
But people do, with Legends and Losers, I hear it all the time. And, because we've been both from day one, and people seem to love the video.
Right. I'm shooting a show right now with Joel Comm and Jay Baer called the BBC. And one of the things that I found interesting about the BBC experience is that we record it live in front of people using this thing called BeLive.tv. And we get a lot of interaction live compared to everything else.
And then, so if you think about the video blogging, video podcast future, you know, what's your thoughts about it in the context of the three of us and everybody as consumers of this stuff? And then what do you think it means to businesses, whether you're a media company or you're any kind of company? Walk us through the two sides in your head.
So let me do it in reverse order, because I think all companies are now media companies. They just don't know it yet, or they're not ready to admit it yet.
You've been talking a lot about that on your blog, on your podcast, haven't you?
For years, such as it were. But
are people getting it that every company is a media company?
No. So what happens almost invariably at good sized companies, I work with the gamut. I work with, one guy companies, and I work with 80,000 people companies, or I've worked with Google and Microsoft. They have a few more people, but when they hear it, they always think of it as the kiddie table at Thanksgiving. They never, ever, they immediately shut it off. They think my niece, my nephew, and they think my marketing guy, we got the one that has the goo in his hair. That's probably the one. And we'll get a pretty girl, call it a day. And they're dismissive like that, and they just knock it out. But I really mean DNA fabric level stuff. And Sun modeled this in blogs way back in like 1998, 1999, or whatever. Sun had blogs where there was like 25 people paying attention to this particular blog, but it was the 25 people who were likely to order this $18 million piece of equipment. And it was all 25 potential buyers of that equipment reading the blog every single day. So I think that that's what comes next. And I think that this, of course, means changes to policy. I think the creation and distribution of the content, if we get inundated by millions of clips of video from every single company, we'll be just as blind as we are to anything else we are right now. And so curation becomes important, and sort of on-demand kind of experience. There's a lot of how-to stuff. How do you make homebrew, for example? How do you make homebrew is a really quick couple of things you can look up on YouTube, and you can see a 3-minute clip, or you can see an hour and 55-minute clip, and someone wants both. And so I think that there's a lot of opportunity.
Well, and the interesting thing to me there, Chris, sorry to interrupt you again, but every company today who has a product has essentially, whether they realize it or not, outsourced their user manual to their raving super consumer fans who, like, on the unboxings and all of that, and any regular Jill or Joe becomes like a product reviewer, right? And then if 100%. You need to know how to clean it or integrate it with something or whatever it is. And so it's fascinating to me that through UGC, you have these raving fans who are delivering all this knowledge.
That is 100% true. So in 2012, I was looking to buy a piece of musical equipment, musical software, and it was editing type software. And one piece was like, they were both like around $800 to $1,000. One piece had 4 videos on YouTube, all created by the company. The other piece had 400 videos, all created by other people. Yeah. Who do you go with?
Which one did you buy, right?
Not even a question. You're like, not one other loser wanted to shoot a video screencast of this thing? And the answer was no.
Now, here's something on my mind about that. I recently had an interaction with a very large technology company who I won't name, and a senior executive there wanted me to come in and do a little bit of coaching for them. And I'm mostly retired, but I'm friends with the guy, blah, blah. Anyway, in order to get this done, they sent me an email, and in it had a click-through, and I swear to God, I'm not making this up. They had 57 fucking documents that I had to look at and fill out. And at the bottom of the email, it says estimated time to complete 10 hours. Jeez. So I emailed my buddy, client back, and I said, look, I don't fucking do, I don't mean to sound like a douchebag, but I'm Christopher Lochhead. I ain't fucking.
I'm not doing this.
It's going to cost me a fortune to have my lawyer look at these things. And so the point I'm leading to is, if you think about, it feels like to me that bigger companies have got more and more conservative. And if the three of us work for a giant corporation and we were delivering some kind of message out to the world like this, there's a high degree of likelihood one of us is going to say something that somebody in HR or legal or whatever didn't like. And so with all of that said, do you see this video blogging, video podcasting as an opportunity for smaller companies because big companies are going to be conservative?
I think that in general, there's a real opportunity around velocity. So there's three factors, there's three metrics I love the most in life. One is velocity, the other is friction, and the other is connectedness. And I think that these types of tools allow for that. And so for me, the really important thing of my big thing in life, if there's some, if I had a category, it's using technology to help drive better human interaction. That's what I do no matter what I do. That's my category. So when I work with Google on one end of the spectrum, or I work on a healthcare company or a Caldwell Banker, it's always these kinds of projects, no matter what it is that they really want in topic. So yes, I think that anyone's going to make you try to go through 10 hours of documents isn't going to get done. All of these tools are gate jumpers. When email first came out, Bill Gates answered emails, when it first came out, because he was so like, oh my gosh, I got an email. He was so happy. Right? When Twitter came out, I was one of the forefront guys of Twitter. I was user 10,212. And suddenly I'm followed by a bunch of people I have no right being followed by, including just like a week or two ago, Barack Obama, which is weird. And it's not like we, organize lunch parties together. But it just seems weird that I have private message access to a former president, which just didn't happen in any other technologies. So I say this to say that the other benefit of using things like video, and that's just one tool, one arrow in the green arrow's quiver. The reason why video is because when people see my passion, they go, he's weird and he's crazy, but he really wants to do something, as opposed to, I really think innovation is the future and we're going to go very far together. And I think that there's just such an opportunity to really put your humanity in front. Yeah. And I think, and this is, Christopher, this 100%, and Michael, I'm sure, lives by this. We want to dequalify and disqualify people every bit as much as we want to qualify.
For sure.
Chris, we do something in the telemarketing world, which I came out of, the demand gen world. We have people have a video window of themselves while they're talking on the phone. So they can see how they're interacting, and it improves the character that they're delivering. It's amazing what it can do. It used to be the old trick was you put a mirror on your desk and look at yourself, but now we can do it with video. But
service with a smile.
Yeah.
And the other thing I think you mentioned direct access to Barack Obama. The thing that's incredible is a couple guys like us can create what effectively is a broadcast network for a few $1,000s.
Yeah.
And then we can have this direct interaction. I mean, the thing that I've loved about podcasting is the interaction. I know you talk about it a lot on your show as well, that you want people to email you, you want to hear what people say, you want them commenting and all that. And I wouldn't have understood it the way I understand it now, because this direct interaction is incredibly powerful. And then, of course, the people who are in your world interact with each other, and then you're in their world, and we're all in each other's world, right? And so there's a participatory, people use this word engagement. Great, it's a good word, but it's now overused. What I love about it is the participatory part of it, where people are kind of doing stuff together. Is that an opportunity that you see?
It's vast. I mean, let me give you a real world and very close to 3 feet away from you example. Michael and I hadn't seen each other in person in a little while. Mike mentions he's going to be somewhat in the neighborhood. He says, I want to swing by. We meet at a coffee shop that's near my house. Really strange service, but nice people, I guess. He brings a copy of the book. I get to read the book. I love the book. It's great. I'm like, oh my gosh, how come I can't do this? And in the process, I'm working with a client. I email Mike yesterday or the day before, and I say, hey, Mike, I just got this opportunity where the guy actually used the phrase category creation and asked me, is that something I could do for him? And I said, believe me, I wanted to say yes, but I know you, so here's the lead. And I basically took money out of my pocket to put into Mike's pocket. I think that there's a ton of that out there. And what I love about it is, as long as enough of us think that all the water is going to raise all the boats, I think there's so much opportunity not to think about competition. I know we're not supposed to talk like that, but I think if we work really hard on serving, I think we get so much more out of this whole thing, and that we can help other people with the tools.
You just said something I'm very passionate about right now. I'm giving a speech tomorrow in Boston, and at the end of the speech, I have like the top 17 things be legendary and build your own category, right? And the first one is losers compete.
Yep.
My personal quote for this, if I were gonna be one of those douches that made his own graphics, one of my favorite quotes is, "No one ever won a race looking sideways."
Yep. I'm actually friends with all my competitors from the demand gen world. I know them all.
It's a damn small world, and I mean, Mike, you go to the same conferences for that, and you see people that had like 5 different badges there. So there's no sense throwing rocks at any particular company or person, because you're going to work with them one day.
Certainly.
Yeah. And the other thing too, of course, in the context of category design is, who would you rather be, Bob Marley or the 47th reggae musician?
Right. Yeah. And I think there's so many great opportunities in that specific thing. I mean, if you could be their first and best, you're forever going to have just so much of a lead. I mean, I love the stats in the book, Play Bigger. I know this isn't an ad, but I loved the stats about just how far ahead you could get when you pick those kinds of things, and when you were so far ahead for a reason. And it's just interesting, even the fact that Microsoft has always sort of had this number 2-ish kind of feel for the last several decades. What Satya Nadella, I'm saying his name awfully, what the new guy running Microsoft is doing, which is way different than what Ballmer was doing. Ballmer was playing Me Too, I'll get there. And Satya is saying, we have so many cool things that we never didn't have, and we're just going to shine them up to make sure you know that they're still there. And they're really pushing hard on all the stuff that they've owned the category on for a really long time. So I think that there's just a lot of opportunity for that. And they're not thinking competitor-wise the way they were in the Ballmer days. They're back to thinking like people who want to really serve something kick-ass to the people they serve.
So do you think we'll see Microsoft actually, for the first time, and you tell me, but almost 20 years, pioneering new categories?
Yes. I think what they're going to do first, though, is surprise a lot of people in the categories we think are run by other people. There was just a stat out saying how much Microsoft Cloud is out there right now, and I was really surprised compared to Google and Amazon Cloud. I would have absolutely given it much more to Google or Amazon. And I would say that there's a few other categories like that. For instance, there's this new sort of meme out there about, will Microsoft, save the tablet category? Now, I personally don't find tablets especially interesting because I'm a creator, so there's very little that's value to me in a consumption tool, but somebody likes them.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, Chris, because when the iPad first came out, of course, I bought one, and I thought it was really cool, and I was kind of obsessed with it for the better part of a year. I really loved it. But then I don't know if it was, where laptops went or where phones went, they sort of, those 2 categories continued, and all of a sudden, I didn't use a tablet anymore. I still have a Kindle. I use that, mostly just to watch TV on the road or to read books on the road, so I don't have to carry a bunch of shit. But it's not anywhere near a daily part of my life. And the other thing I found, I don't know if you guys are finding this. This is maybe a crazy thing to say, but I love my laptop and my phone way more now than I did a year ago.
Yeah.
That sound crazy?
I could buy that. I think it's partly because of that feeling of, wait a minute, all the things I thought I could or couldn't do on my tablet, I don't have to worry about it. The phone's got it on this end and the laptop's got it on that end.
Yeah, and I find it amazing that you can do anything you want on those devices, whether it's watch Batman and fall asleep, or deliver a podcast, or, write a book, or and so it's just, it like, and maybe it's too, maybe I'm getting a little older. I'm maybe appreciating things a little more. I'm like, this is a magical fucking thing. The other day I was in Philadelphia on the way here, and I went down to get to wait for my car to get to the airport, and the guy wasn't there. And I didn't have the number of the company. I was like, okay, no problem. You Google that. There's the service number. You press a button. Anyway, in 2 seconds, the guy is here. And as we're driving away, I had this aha. The iPhone's going to be 10 this year, right?
Right.
So 10 years ago, that was really not possible, even with a BlackBerry.
Right.
And so, one of my favorite quotes from Bill Gates is, people underestimate the impact of a new technology in the short term, or they overestimate it in the short term and underestimate it in the long term. And I just had this love moment with my iPhone, because I went, wow, like, this has only been possible relatively recently.
It's true. And there's some new technologies that are only just now starting to break the mainstream a little more, like Alexa. If I say her name, she'll light up and
I have one over
hell
here.
will happen. But I mean, I could order pizza on it. I could do the weather. My son and I were doing video game news briefs this morning on it. So, I mean, there's all kinds of, and that headless kind of interface is becoming more popular. VR and AR, there's just so many things that are telling me that I have to stop thinking it's going to fail. I just read a big article about that saying, stop it. It's really not going to fail. And I'm like, okay, fine. I'm still not there, but I was talking to the head of a very large training department of the largest tool company in the world. And he was saying, we desperately need this. There's OSHA reasons why I can't bring new people to job sites all over the place, but I want to show them what it would be like. So I'd love to have a walkthrough. And with augmented reality, to be able to have glasses on and know that the boiler part you're looking at is exactly the 414 and not the 416 or whatever it is. I mean, there's some stuff that we all can laugh at now, but it's going to be commonplace accidentally in a couple of years.
Well, and of course, one of the areas there that I'm most excited about are all of the medical and healthcare opportunities. To think that an EMT in the field could be talking to a world-class doctor to how to deal with an emergency situation, or maybe a doctor who's sort of more of a generic doctor somewhere in a third world country could talk to a Stanford expert, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and literally be in there with that stuff starts to blow my mind.
What about something like this? You talked about it recently. Watson, with these symptoms, what do you think the patient has? And then it comes back and tells you. I mean, it's pretty cool stuff right now.
And so is that the stuff you're most excited about in sort of, if you will, the medium-term technology future, Chris?
Yeah, I would say that the things that I'm most interested in is I'm trying to work through this whole concept of what I've been calling the database of one. And that is the idea that in lieu of giant funnels, in lieu of buyer personas, in lieu of all this, who exactly is Mike Damphouse and what kind of bacon does he buy? And why should I know that if I'm doing this or that? And does he stay at Kimpton Properties or does he stay at Marriott Properties? And what does he need in his room? And how come every time he walks in, we have to treat him as if we just met him for the first time, even though he stayed 780 times? So to me, the really exciting midterm universe is a mix of chatbots and that kind of voice interface stuff, gathering more data, as well as video and all that sort of a thing, and AI parsing and using that data faster to surface human needs and human preferences in real time instead of after someone's come and gone.
And Mike, you just talked about Watson. In this, IBM's doing a tremendous job here. There's no doubt about it. As these things play out, I mean, both you guys, do you think it'll be the IBMs and the Microsofts who are seizing these new category opportunities around these new technologies? Or do you think it'd be more like what we've seen in the past where, for the most part, it's startup innovators who are doing it and the big guys are chasing them?
I've had a chance to see Watson a couple times, or rather humans touching Watson a couple times, and it seems like you really don't want to count it out. Strangely, Warren Buffett bought his first IBM stocks not too long ago and just recently reversed that a little and sold a bunch, which freaked out a lot of people. I don't know what to make of that, and I'm not going to really pretend I'm Warren Buffett for a few minutes, but I will say that was weird. I think that Watson is the only business line that they have that still looks viable in the future to me. I think it's the one where they're creating lawyers and doctors and all these other kinds of things that used to be human. I think that's huge. I think if I were Buffett and I were trying to guess, there's going to be a sell-off of a lot of the other chunks of the industry, and it's going to look like a startup again, and I think that's what he's hedging for.
So you think they might pare IBM down and get it focused on the new forward-leaning categories?
Maybe it'll just be M.
Machine. I'll tell you, I spoke to last week, I was talking to a startup, 3 guys in a basement, and it's an AI tool. And when they pitched it to me, I went, if you can pull that off, you're going to have $1 billion market. And they think they're going to do it. And they're 3 guys in a basement. They're not 10,000 engineers at IBM. But I think personally, the great ideas are always going to be spawned from the little guys, the quick, great ideas, big thinkers, and then the big guys, IBMs and Microsofts, they'll catch the trend to potentially get there first because they have the capacity.
One of my favorite little stories that comes from nothing in particular. When HubSpot moved to their new digs over closer to the Cambridge side Galleria Mall, they did this thing where it's weird in retrospect. You could understand the finances. They spent money to buy whiteboard paint for every other wall in the building.
Yeah.
So wall here is whiteboard paint, wall here is white paint, wall here is whiteboard paint. And so, certain walls were really all written on. So someone ran over one day in zeal in a marker and wrote, "Why hasn't anyone?" Oh, and then they realized what they'd done. Yeah. They wrote on the wrong wall. And it was there for like weeks because they had to, pay someone to come and repaint it. And I argued and I lost. You should frame that, because why hasn't anyone is one of the best questions ever.
Yeah.
And I continue to use that in speeches, even though it was a random anecdote that I have no real ownership of.
Now, if we sort of switch a little bit, and can we talk a little bit about entrepreneurship, Chris?
Yeah.
How do you think overall, entrepreneurship is in the world?
It's at a strange time right now. We have a problem. It's a branding problem where people think that blogging, tweeting, and Snapchatting equals entrepreneurship. They think that that is what entrepreneurs do because there's people with glue in their hair that tell them you can sit on a beach if you tweet enough. And that's bull. Entrepreneurs are...
So are you saying that you can't go to the grocery store and buy groceries with your likes?
I keep trying. I checked on my bank with a mortgage and they said they don't care if I got enough hashtags. It just doesn't count. So the feeling I have is I wouldn't use the word for a very long time. I only reluctantly call myself an entrepreneur. I like to say I'm a worker. And I've always been very much into this sort of blue collar aesthetic. Like I'm much happier wearing like jeans and work shoes around than I am ever wearing a suit. I carry a backpack so I look like a weird 47-year-old boy with a white beard. And it's because the thing I last want in life is for someone to accidentally think I'm some suit. I have long hair because Branson said, why would I want to ever look like the people that I'm taking out of business? And I live by that. And I would say that
you have good hair too.
Thank you. I wish I could claim anything about it besides my grandfather's genetics, but I do nothing to make it better.
What conditioner do you use?
I don't, but I do use Skinny and Company's coconut oil soap in it.
Love it.
So I could, and it's all natural and there's like 5 whole ingredients, but with entrepreneurship, I think there's so many people lying about that they're entrepreneurs and they're all going to go work at Best Buy again soon. And once that happens, then it's going to be okay again. Think about it. We have access to Stripe for free. So we're a merchant for free. We have WordPress for free. We're a website and a media company for free. Podcasting for free-ish. If you have a smartphone, you've got all the tools to do all the podcasting you want to do. We have all kinds of tools. MailChimp and all that has free up to X amount of customers. You could start low and get up there, right? There's all these things. Kickstarter, if you want to have people fund your venture, go get it, right? There's never been that infrastructure before. There's never been all those kinds of things. I can take money from anyone with a credit card or whatever. They can pay me in pesos. I can take it. That's new in this whole environment. And it's so weird to me that what we do with all this culminated power is think about things like new filters for Snapchat or, a new kind of funny bot for Slack or something that we hope we get $8 million to run. I think entrepreneurship is built on something broke. Now we got to go fix it. I think this healthcare bill that's going through Congress right now might give us a great opportunity to learn a lot and give us a lot of opportunities to recreate stuff that's currently about to be broken.
So I don't know if you saw this, but it's something that's motivated me like a madman ever since I did. In March of last year, the Journal ran a story based on some MIT and Brookings research, and the headline, Chris, said, "The Crisis in American Entrepreneurship." And it went on to tell the story that essentially more companies die in the United States every week than are born, and we're at the lowest level in recorded entrepreneurship, and the millennials are going to be the least entrepreneurial generation in American history. And I read that and I was knocked over because, I live near Silicon Valley and I lived in Silicon Valley for a very long time. And it feels like everybody and their brother's a startup. And to your point, all these tweeting your dudes with hair think they're entrepreneurs. So it feels in my world like everybody's an entrepreneur. What if that's not the case? And so I guess my question is, with all these opportunities and the lowering cost of all of this stuff, making entrepreneurship a huge opportunity, why are we at this low?
With all things, it's vision. And it's also not going to the right places to look. The next interesting things aren't likely going to come out of the same little valley crowd. The PayPal mafia is slowly, winding its way out. There, the iteration of the iteration of the iteration is finally going away. And I can tell you that, to me, where I would look are Birmingham, Alabama, Detroit, Michigan. I would look at places like Nashville. I would look at any of the places, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I would look at any of the places that are formerly great for some reason that aren't great right now, and that there's got to be some kind of real tangible opportunity spawned from it. To me, where entrepreneurship comes is when someone has to reinvent a category, again, your words, but they have to rebuild. Like, they have to decide that they've got to be good for something. And to me, like, for instance, insourcing is one of those great opportunities, right? Oklahoma people suddenly being the call center again instead of Bangladesh. By the way, what an unprecedented time where all this, rampant racism is happening. What a perfect time to make a call center in the U.S. Ride that negative trend in a good way, right?
That's a very devious mind. That's a great way to think about it.
Use the enemy's tools. I don't care. And I'm not saying any particular party's the enemy, but what I'm saying is, the people who get richest and most successful in life find opportunity on either side of what happened. The people who are going to make something happen are the people who take a down day and make it a profitable day, and they take an up day and they make it a profitable day. The ones who mess it up are the ones who take a down day, get profitable, do well, and then fade. Or the people who have only up days when they start, hit the down days, and then explode on impact. The ones who really thrive are the ones who say, I'm going to play what cards are in front of me right now. It was actually a philosopher who really turned me on to this, David Lee Roth. He said, you do the best with what you've got.
Well said.
I recently, we had this gal on Legends and Losers named Amy Morin, and she's a thought leader in the sort of mental tough world. And she's written a great book about it and so forth. And so I was looking for some quotes, and David Lee Roth said, the problem with self-improvement is, how do you know when to stop?
Nice.
I almost peed myself. Anyway, we know you've got some family things that you want to go do. I need to go do, Chris. Is there anything else that is on your mind that you'd like to share before we kick out of this one?
The only thing that's on my mind is that for anyone who listens to a show like this and says, wow, I'm nothing like those people, that's great, because nobody is, right? Like, nobody's this until they're this, right? Nobody's this until someone gives them the time of day. We were all picked last in gym class. You know what I mean? None of us were like the voted most likely to get a date on XYZ night. A lot of us had all kinds of other strangenesses in our lives, that precluded anyone thinking we were going to go somewhere. And one day, suddenly, it was like, who knew? And it's the best American movie story always used a million billion times, which is, it was you all along, right? Well, I don't understand how we can watch a steady diet of it was you all along and not think it was you all along. So I just hope that people, go find their own mess and break stuff and become losers first.
Cool.
Well, Chris, I got to personally thank you. I appreciate your kind words about Play Bigger. And most importantly, I've dedicated the rest of my life to trying to make a big difference in entrepreneurship. And who you are, what you do, the amazing stuff you deliver in the world. It really is inspiring. Your show's captivating, and your books, and like, you're just, and the thing is, a lot of guys who do the kind of thing that you do, it sort of feels like, or not a lot, but some, it feels like it's sort of an ego thing, and they're just like, they're a glorified Kardashian. And everything about you is the opposite of that.
Completely genuine.
It's almost depressing sometimes, yes. But I think that some of my bigger role models in life are all those servant leader types, and I think that if I ever believe that I've made it is probably the start of the biggest of the falls. So I'm going to save that for some other time in my life when I'm like 87 or something. I think is when it would be a good time to really fade out.
Well, thank you so much for your support of Play Bigger, but most importantly, thank you for being Chris Brogan. And please do a lot more of it, and we hope to welcome you back on Legends and Losers in a little bit.
Thanks, gentlemen, for having me. It was a real pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Chris.
All right, there it is, our discussion with internet legend, marketing legend, Chris Brogan.
That was awesome, man. That guy has so much just integrity and wants to give so much to the entrepreneurial community. Don't you just love it?
I do. I really enjoyed our time with him, and I hope we get to spend a whole lot more. And if you like this episode, check out our episode with Brian Kramer, the social media marketing star and author of Shareology and H2H. And Colin, we got some shout outs we'd like to do.
Yes, we do. Matt Donnelly for his Facebook shout out.
Jesse Garcia for his Facebook post about Play Bigger. Thanks a lot, Jesse.
Julian Colvard for his Facebook 3 Kinds of People post.
Yeah, what are the 3 kinds of people?
The 3 kinds of people are
Those who suck,
those who don't suck, and those that are
legendary. And we'd like to thank the legendary Mike McCarthy and the whole team at One Life Fully Lived for this fantastic event we just had in Philadelphia, and for including me. And I'd also like to thank Peter Cohen and our friends at the Front End Innovation Conference in Boston for having me come and speak. Thank you so much.
So please subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, and or YouTube.
This podcast is not free. It costs you 2 minutes to give us a legendary review.
Find us on facebook.com/groups/legends and losers.
On the Twitter machine at Legends Losers.
And email is blackhole@legendsandlosers.com.
We would like to thank
HarperCollins, bestseller Play Bigger, How Pirates, Dreamers, and Innovators Create and Dominate Markets.
Equity Directory, connecting startups to the talent and resources they need to build a legendary business.
OneLifeFullyLived.org, the nonprofit helping the dream, plan, and live your best life.
Chris Brogan's smash hit podcast, The Owner's Mind.
Chi Power Arts Healing in Santa Cruz, California.
Now it's my own plug.
Category Design Advisors, dominate your market category.
Yeah, Category Design Advisors.
The great podcast, The Ziegler Show with Kevin Miller.
Habitat for Humanity, building new futures.
Tahoe Truckee Homes, make your Tahoe dream happen.
And a spectacular catastrophe, the amazing new book from our friend and guest, Dushka Zapata.
Today's information is provided to you solely for informational purposes.
This oddcast is the sole property of the Legends and Losers Oddcast Network, and please share the shit out of it.
All rights disturbed.
This oddcast was produced in a studio clearly that contains nuts.
Teach category design.
Support your local CMO.
Don't be lame. Get out of the passing lane.
Legends and Losers listeners are sexy.
And this product is not intended for wankers.
San Francisco is so overcrowded, no one goes there anymore.
Introduce 2 people you love to 2 podcasts you love.
This oddcast really ties the room together.
And our apologies to Greg Clark, CEO of Symantec. Sorry, Greg, we just ran out of time for you. That's it. Be legendary.